Live from beautiful downtown Vancouver and West Kelowna, British Columbia, Misha and Dianne are watching Santa Barbara.
I want to be back in the bosom of my family again. You don't mind if I'm in your bosom, do you? You two run along and play houseboat.
Hi, Dianne.
Hi.
It is Monday, September 16th, 1985, and I am dropping Calculus 3. So I'm now taking only 3 courses for this semester. Linear algebra, statistics, and I can't remember what the third one was, but I think it might be with the same teacher who's doing the statistics. So I see him twice a day. I have 2 chances to fall asleep in his class.
It sounds like a pretty math-heavy load you're taking.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted stuff that I could transfer up to SFU, but then I'd kind of run out of a lot of the lower stuff. So I just wanted another 4 months of free rent before I had to go to another city and start paying. All right, in the world of Santa Barbara, Janice Harrison introduces herself to Nick. Cruz stops by briefly to crack a few jokes, as she has only slightly upgraded from her towel to her underwear. She tells Nick that that she is Dylan's girlfriend, and reveals that Dylan hasn't really been in medical school at all for the last 3 years. He has been flying cargo planes in Africa. So Nick is a little bit annoyed by this. He tells her, I've been scrimping and saving, and I bought an old used car and I felt guilty for a month. And then she says, oh yeah, also Nick says, Nick says that he'll kill Dylan. And then Janice says, Dylan also warned her that he is in danger, and so is she, and that he's coming to Santa Barbara.
So Dylan sounds about as reputable as we thought someone going to a Caribbean medical school would be. And it turns out he's been basically scamming Nick this whole time. Mm-hmm. And, for me, reading between the lines, the shipping cargo in Africa sounds a lot like smuggling.
Yes,
so I'm assuming this is maybe involving some illegal activity on Dylan's part.
Yeah, I think maybe the people that are after him were either fellow smugglers or people he lost their shipment that he was supposed to be smuggling or something like that.
Now he's decided to bring the problem right to Nick. So again, not the most reputable move, I would say. So yeah. I'm already feeling not very sympathetic towards Dylan, and I haven't even met him yet.
Yeah, I guess we will probably be meeting him pretty soon, and he may have some gangsters in tow. I don't really remember this storyline at all, but just looking ahead at some of the actors who are coming, it's possible it overlaps with something that I just read about recently, actually. Apparently, Santa Barbara offered one of the other soap operas some money, apparently, to rent one of their characters.
Oh, wow.
So we may be seeing a film. We will be seeing a familiar face soon, and it's possible it's related to the storyline. So, of course, Janice has no place to stay. Nick tries to kick her out anyway. She says, yeah, I guess the beach looked like it might be comfy. So, of course, soft-hearted Nick lets her stay. So I suspect tomorrow morning, Kelly will be showing up and Janice will once again be in a towel.
Yeah, I can see this causing all sorts of issues with Kelly, not only in terms of a bit of a Janice, Nick, Kelly triangle, although I'm still not convinced Kelly's really that interested in Nick romantically. But also, this is going to present all kinds of opportunities for Kelly to be in danger once Dylan arrives and has a bunch of gangsters in tow. Maybe she'll even fall, for Dylan, who knows? but there's all kinds of potential dangers here
Yeah,
for
that would be a
Kelly.
kick in the head to Nick if Kelly falls for Dylan.
Yeah.
The gangsters might give us another opportunity to add another psycho that tries to kill Kelly to our
Yeah.
pantheon. So actually, at one point, Nick says to Cruz, when Cruz is kind of making jokes about why is there a woman in a towel in your room. Nick says, "Don't tell Kelly," and they said, "Oh, on second thought, maybe tell Kelly. We'll see if he's jealous. We'll see if she's jealous." So. So maybe we'll see. Maybe Kelly will decide she's jealous when she meets
Maybe.
Janice. I'm sure she'll meet Janice and she'll be in a towel.
Yeah, and there's even some potential here because we're almost due for Cruz and Eden to have a break because they're getting close to being
To a wedding.
married again. So,
They'll either have a
with
wedding
Cruz
or
being Nick's friend, maybe they'll get dragged into it somehow too.
yeah, that's true. If you got smugglers after you, you might need Cruz involved. So Eden tells Cruz that I got that backwards. Cruz tells Eden that he just got off the phone with Ted and that Ted and Christy have revealed that the shooting was an accident and also that Lakin has left Ted. So that's kind of an interesting off-camera thing because Ted wasn't in this episode. It would be hilarious if tomorrow he gets a call saying, "Oh, they've decided to drop the charges," and that's the end of the storyline.
Yeah.
After this big buildup, because the sweeps did kind of end last week, probably. So I don't know. I have no idea. I have no memory of how that whole thing wrapped up either. Like this whole semester, even though I probably saw 2 out of every 5 episodes, I don't remember anything until around Christmas time. I remember a few things. So. And of course, Cruz and Eden discuss getting married. They decide Capwell Castillo might be a good surname for Eden. I think they had that conversation once before, actually. Eden says that Mason needs to be kept out of Capwell affairs. So that, of course, is not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then we find out how Cruz injured his leg. All those seems like weeks ago, but we've been watching slowly. It might only have been a few days. He has a ladder and there's some sort of, not really, I wouldn't say attic in the houseboat, but maybe a cubbyhole. And he was climbing up that ladder in order to get Eden's engagement ring out of storage. So he ends up sending Eden up the ladder to get it and has some inappropriate physical contact with her as he helps her down the ladder. And then Eden at first doesn't want to put it on. But I think he does talk her into it at the end, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he says, because Eden feels that with her dad being in a coma, basically, and the family being in all this turmoil, that it's really not appropriate for her to be flaunting an
Right.
engagement. And I think Cruz basically convinces her that it can just be between the two of them. They don't have to make a big announcement or anything, and she can just quietly wear the ring and know that they're engaged.
Mm-hmm. She does. He does tell her that she doesn't need to be by Cece's bedside 24 hours a day, too.
Mm-hmm.
Gina says goodnight to Cece. And once again, Charles Bateman is just lying there with an oxygen mask on his face. So pretty easy role, I guess. And Gina tells Cece that she loves Mason. And she intends to still stay married to Cece. So if
have her cake and eat it too.
She had a great scene of talking to Cece. She said a lot of stuff that would really enrage him if he were conscious. So who knows if he's processing that internally. Eden is suddenly annoyed to find Gina there alone with Cece and the nurse gone. Now Mary's asleep, but I guess there's a night nurse. Eden says that it's okay if Gina sits in on the board meeting tomorrow, but she can't take part. Eden tells the night nurse that Gina's not really Cece's wife, so don't treat her like a wife. And remember, if she asked her not to let her in there alone, I was kind of typing, but yeah. So I don't know. You just kind of, I guess if you're a nurse who goes and works in people's houses, you kind of hear this kind of family stuff all the time. You just have to kind of roll with it.
Yeah.
And then Gina finds Mason's suitcase in the atrium. So she's excited because she knows Mason is home.
Yeah.
She thinks, oh, I bet he's in his room, and runs up. Now, of course, she's forgotten that she gave Mason's room to Mary. And in that room, Mary wakes up to find Mason in bed sleeping next to her. She ends up kissing his hand. So she obviously is interested in Mason, as we all suspected. Gina comes in and starts to get into bed with Mason. Now, Mary had hidden under the covers at first when Gina walked in, but I guess Mary realizes she's got to stop this at some point. So she pretends she's waking up and then pretends to be shocked to see Mason there. And of course, allows Gina to pretend that she just came in to check on things. So,
that was a pretty clever way for her to deal with it, I think.
Yeah. So I think she knows something's going on with Mason and Gina.
Yeah.
But I think she wants to feel out just how into it Mason is, because I think it's obvious he's into her too.
Yeah.
So they wake Mason up, and when Mason sees them both there, he says, I hope neither of you took advantage of me. So Mason gets kicked out, and Gina fluffs Mary's pillow and tells her to lock the door. And she does. So Mason's wandering around the Capwell mansion with a pillow and a blanket looking for somewhere to sleep. He visits Cece briefly and tries out some of his oxygen and kind of enjoys it. Then in the hallway, he runs into Eden. She says, what the hell are you doing here? He says, I've come home to stay. I've come back here to be in the bosom of my family. You don't mind if I'm in your bosom, do you? And then Gina finds them and immediately brings up the board meeting tomorrow and kind of pushes it in Eden's face that now that Mason's back, she will have some power at that board meeting. And Cruz shows up, and Mason says to Cruz and Eden, you two run along and play houseboat. And he opts to sleep in the fountain, which is still empty and not running. And he tells Gina he always wanted to sleep in the fountain as a kid, but Dad never let him. So,
I'm really struck by how small the massive Capwell mansion is.
Well, Gina's constantly trying to find people. Like last week, she couldn't find Brandon and Lionel for the longest time.
But they don't seem to have that many bedrooms, really.
No, it's. I think there are 2 hallways upstairs, like an L shape, because we've seen Mason's at the end apparently, and Cece's nearby, but Channing's room is across from Kelly's, which we saw in the early days. So I think there are 2 little L-shaped hallways.
Yeah, and for a bit, you're right. Channing's room was, I think, near Kelly's. And for a bit, I had thought, well, maybe they've actually, because Cece had said no one should ever enter Channing's room. And I thought, well, maybe that's actually a whole other wing of the house. But I don't think it is. I think it's just a fairly small manor house, all told. But one that's apparently got a lot of navigating, because characters are always disappearing for long periods of time, too. So maybe a few rooms and lots of hallways. I don't know.
I mean, it makes me wonder if there is, as we have discussed, a second staircase somewhere. And they, managed to miss each other by just taking the servant's staircase for speed at some point. So Gina won't let Mason sleep because she wants to strategize about tomorrow's meeting. Mary sneaks downstairs to kind of spy on them, I guess, to see how they are with each other, to confirm her suspicions. And then later Mason notices Mary's lipstick print on his hand from when she kissed him. And he gets out a red magic marker and circles it. He says, this way I'll know in the morning that it wasn't a dream. So I think he must know that it must have been Mary, right?
Yeah.
So we have a little triangle between Mason and Mary and Gina, which I don't remember either. So this will be fun. Gina's got a lot of irons in the fire. I mean, she's in several stories. She's hiding a will. She's, fighting for her son. She's constantly crabby at CC. So
Well, she doesn't even know about the potential legal action that Santana's going to take to get Brandon. She does know about Lionel's possible claim, so I think that's a whole other aspect as well.
And she's got a constant struggle to keep Sophia and Santana from just waltzing into the house. So.
Yeah,
she's become a very pivotal character. Cruz and Eden get back to the houseboat, and Eden tells Cruz that I'm going to end up fighting Mason. He's always wanted to be Cece. So I think she realizes she'll have quite a fight on her hands tomorrow.
Yeah, that'll be a fun. Probably, I would think it wouldn't just be one episode. I would think they would stretch it a little bit, but it'll be quite a fun thing to.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. Have we ever? I don't know if we've ever seen the interior of the Capwell boardroom.
Well, I was trying to think. I mean, there was way back when Mason had managed to procure the Lockridge beachfront property.
I don't know. I remember that meeting. There was a nice long meeting table there. I don't know if that was at Capwell or not, but I guess we'll see if it looks similar.
Now, I assume that it's been newly renovated as well, because remember, that's why Eden and Jack Stanfield Lee's representative were camped out in Cruz's houseboat at one point, talking about Capwell business.
So. Yeah, they were saying Eden's office was being renovated, which I guess was formerly Peter's office. So I don't know if the boardroom would be part of that, but yeah, I guess we'll see a boardroom. We'll probably see Eric there. They'll probably talk about where Jack is. See Eden. We'll see maybe some other random Capwell attorneys. We'll see Mason there. Maybe they'll keep it small, and we'll see Gina there. So yeah, that should be fun. Some corporate shenanigans. We'll see if they're able to write the corporate stuff better than Days of Our Lives with their quite terrible corporate wranglings that they have.
Yeah, I think they do it perhaps a little better on Young and Restless, but generally I'm finding with the modern soap operas, it's more about the relationships than the corporate side.
Yeah, and I guess one wonders if there are any shareholders, but I think they said the other day Cece's the sole owner of Capwell Enterprises.
Seems like it's a private company.
So that, it would be a fairly small board meeting, but there may be some vice presidents or presidents that, of different divisions that will be present and have an interest in the continuity of the company. And they may end up voting, between Eden and Mason.
Although that'd be fun.
If Mason's got the documents, maybe they don't even need a vote. So. And that was it for a Monday episode.
Yeah.
So we'll see the meeting tomorrow. We haven't seen Ted, so he's off looking for Lakin. And we'll see if
we haven't seen Sophia for a while. So I don't know. I would doubt if she would be playing much of a role in the episodes that are focused on the board meetings, but I'm sure she will be back to wrestle with Gina a little bit and spar with Mason possibly. Especially if they do end up victorious in the boardroom and end up making some decisions that don't sit well with Eden and Sophia.
Well, we will look forward to that when we see episode 292 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
I hope neither of you took advantage of me.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 292 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired Tuesday, September 17th, 1985. I'm going to make this a bit bigger since I'm so far away from the screen now. I can't see my own writing. Cruise moves Eden's ring to her other hand so that she can pretend Cece gave it to her.
That was just bizarre.
It was a bizarre scene. She doesn't want to wear the ring because it'll distract from Cece's illness or seem gaudy. So he moves the identical ring to a different hand, clearly an engagement ring. So,
And then says, hey, let's pretend your dad gave you this engagement ring.
yep, they both seem fine with that. So, somewhat goofy. Moving on, Mason wakes up in that fountain. I can't imagine how sore his neck must be after sleeping in that concrete fountain. And his back, probably his legs. And he checks and he finds the lipstick is still on his hand. Later on, Mary comes downstairs and finds Mason all dressed coming through the front door. At first, we don't know what's happened. Mason says to her, I'm not in the habit of checking my bed for young women. Once again, referring to last night's encounter. Also, it's become known through the household that there's a mysterious camera crew on the lawn. And they think they're just there for probably Ted's trial or something, but we find out a little bit differently later on. Mary says that Rosa is a really good cook. And then Mason asks Mary out to dinner. And skip ahead to the end of the episode, and she gets all dressed up, and they go out to the Orient Express,
which has now surpassed La Mesa. And the Street Bistro is the place to be.
I guess if you're going to dress up, you're going to want to go to the Orient Express. Kelly is angry with Mason for sleeping with Gina. She says she hopes she doesn't see him at the board meeting later. He tells her he's planning to put his name forward for chairman of the board. Kelly says Dad wants Eden to run the company. Ted arrives and also tells Mason he expected better of him. So they have a nice little scene where Mason tries to justify sleeping with Gina. And then they turn on the television and they see all the camera crews that are out, filming the front of the house, talking about the Capwells and the trial. But then they change their conversation to the big meeting later on today of the Capwell Enterprises board. And what do we see? An interview with Mason conducted earlier out on the front porch, in which he says that he's basically taking over Capwell Enterprises. And when they ask, what about Eden? He says, oh, she's doing a fine job considering she's inexperienced. So he's trying to get public opinion already on his side. And also, I guess he knows there's that Walton Hotels deal, right? And maybe if he gets this out there in the public, the Walton people will, pick up on that vibe and just assume he's the one to deal with. Ted tells Eric, who is once again filling for Jack Lee, who's busy today, that he and Christy are planning to confess. And Eric says that's a bad idea. Ted tells the same thing to Mason. Mason says that's a good idea, because I guess he knows Ted, and he knows it's best for Ted to come clean with the truth. Later on, we see Julia trying to convince District Attorney Tony Patterson that the shooting was an accident. And Tony's not, super on board with things. Julia's trying very hard to make her case. First thing he does when Julia starts to get on his nerves is ask where Jack Lee is. So Julia points out that, Steve Bassett was working for you when he did all these terrible things. And that's, not going to play well with the public. And Tony stands up and says he never did like lady lawyers and leaves. So it kind of made me think that she had made a point. So it's kind of a weird thing to say, even in 1985, I think. But
Cruz was sort of standing behind her the whole time, looking quite pleased, I think. Not only did she seem to win the day, but she kind of put DA Tony Patterson in his place, too.
So presumably Julia and Jack are coordinating somehow. So sadly, we never did see the next scene of their romantic, they never have had a scene after that romantic encounter day. So now somehow they're clearly working together, but there's just no inkling of what happened with the romance, or if Julia broke it off, how she did. So Julia and Cruz feel like they had a positive impact, and they think maybe Tony will agree to drop the charges. And then later on at the houseboat, they're still thinking, still waiting for the good news, and they are toasting. So they, I think they are expecting the good news, which is interesting if that, after all this, that's, a phone call ends the whole storyline. Although the sweeps are over, so they don't need to excite us anymore. They can just cut the storyline off by saying all charges dropped off screen.
Yeah, I was going to say we may not even get a phone call to wrap it up.
Still waiting for Maggie to call Warren. We haven't even seen Warren for a while, have we?
No, he's been out of commission for a while. I guess he's still working away on his newspaper.
Unless he's the actor who left last week that you didn't guess. Kelly, here's a voice message from Cruz. And he mentions Nick's PI work, which is kind of thrown off Kelly. I thought she knew he was doing PI work, but maybe she didn't quite know what the nature of his other job was. This might prompt her to go over there oh no, she was over there. She was at his place. She was at Nick's place listening to the messages. So we were expecting she'd run into Janice Harrison this.
Yeah.
If she ever came back. And for all we know, Janice may be in the shower.
Yeah, that's right.
But we did not see Nick and we did not see a meeting between Kelly and Janice in this episode.
I'm sure we will, though.
Oh, yes, I'm sure. And then we'll see if Kelly is jealous. The meeting begins. Not in the big corporate boardroom we envisioned, but sort of around Cece's desk in the study. That's pretty amazing. They got Ted, Kelly, Eden, Mason, and Eric around the desk. And just before the meeting, Mason says to Eden, "Where's your associate, Jack the Ripper Lee?" So Jack Lee is still in the forefront of everyone's mind, even though we haven't seen him in almost 2 weeks now. So both Mason and Eden have drawn up competing agendas for this meeting. And Eden says that that's the chairman's duty. And Mason says, we don't have a chairman. And Eden says, as chief of operations, I have the power to call and conduct meetings. So the first thing Mason does is make a motion for an election. Eden says that Walton is first on the agenda, and so that's what will be discussed. So Eden, Kelly, and Ted vote in favor of the Walton merger or takeover, whatever it is. That's 3 votes in favor. Mason votes no. And he says, and I'm voting Brandon's vote no. And I'm voting Brandon's other vote no. And it's a tie. So I can only assume that Brandon has inherited Channing's share. And that's why Brandon has 2 votes.
Yeah.
So this is already better than anything that Days of Our Lives has ever done in a courtroom, and it's only about a third over, or in a boardroom. So Eden says that she can choose a tiebreaker from one of the 2 non-voting directors, clearly installed by Cece at a point when he liked both Gina and Sophia, because those are the 2 non-voting directors of the company. Eden says, I choose Sophia. And then Mason says, oh, no one is allowed to enter the meeting room after it has started. That's too bad. Eden says, no problem. I have her proxy, which she signed to me before this meeting. And then Mason says, that is too bad, because there's a clause in the bylaws of the company that no one who's been on the board of another company in the last 10 years can vote at a Capwell meeting. And Sophia is still sitting on the board of Armonte. So I'm afraid you'll have to pick Gina. To which Eden replies, I have the option of not picking anyone and leaving it as a tie. So Mason then says, well, I'm not really against this Walden merger. It's a really good deal. I would vote in favor of it. And Kelly says, okay, then let's vote. And he says, as soon as you install me as acting president. So Eden and Eric, who, if this were Eden and Jack, would be a real good bonding scene. Eden and Eric spend the next 2 hours going over the bylaws to find another loophole or clause that they could use against Mason. But it seems like they've run out of steam here. Eric touches her shoulder and says she shouldn't burn herself out and suggests she go for a swim. So once again, a scene obviously written for Jack as a, prelude to him hitting on her at some point.
And, I think we can see throughout this episode why everyone keeps saying to Eric, when is Jack Lee coming back? Because we've seen basically 3 examples in this episode of Eric being a terrible lawyer. The first one is, him completely misreading Ted.
Mm-hmm.
And we realize how much he's misread Ted and how much he's kind of fumbled the ball on that when we see Julia at work with DA Tony Patterson. See, Julia's a good lawyer, just like Mason's a good lawyer. And Eric didn't even want to try that. And then we, of course, in this whole scene at the boardroom, the whole, when he and Eden came into that meeting, they were like the cats that had swallowed the canary because they had Sophia's proxy vote.
Mm-hmm.
He says at one point, we've just come from Sophia, we've got her vote.
Yeah.
And then, when Mason points out that they can't use Sophia's vote, he's like, I should have got that.
Mm-hmm.
So he's obviously not even being able to read the rules properly. And then in this weird scene, which we think is probably intended for Jack, he seems a bit delusional, maybe because he's not Jack in this scene, but Eden keeps saying, that didn't go well. I lost. And he keeps saying, you didn't lose, you won. It was Mason who lost. And anyone watching it would say, no, actually Eden did lose.
Yeah.
She's right. And you're an idiot. So.
Because Ted and Kelly stormed out of the meeting, but when it reconvenes, I think they're going to have to, for the good of the company, to get that merger through, they're going to have to vote Mason as acting president.
Yeah. The other thing I notice is that they have, as you said, kind of written Jack Stanfield Lee through this whole episode. And it makes me wonder if they were maybe looking at recasting the role or something, because they mention his absence so many times. They actually mention it as being related to different things. He's just off taking care of something else, whatever. Mm-hmm. And it is actually made clear at one point that he, in this episode, he isn't off in Moscow or something. Mm-hmm. He's actually in Santa Barbara. So,
they actually do say at the start of the meeting, Jack's going to be late to the meeting.
Yeah.
And then we see Eden with Eric. And then the next thing we see is Eden goes home to Cruz. And she said, Jack showed up just, 2 hours after or whatever. And I had to go through the whole thing with him again. And I just had a quick swim and then I came home.
Yeah.
So this actually, I guess the reason for that is so that Eden can still have spent some time with Jack that Cruz can be angry with,
Yeah.
And he's like, none of the 15 phones at the Capwell house worked at all.
Yeah.
So, because he had just blown out the candle that had been burning for several hours. And then she says, what are you drinking for 2 now? And he says, I had Julia over. And that got me thinking, maybe the plan is, if Eden and Jack get closer, if there's another broken off engagement, perhaps Cruz and Julia is a potential pairing because, if Julia and Jack are not an item. So I don't know. Did we see any chemistry there?
Well, I wouldn't say we saw a lot of chemistry over that one thing, but they definitely did seem to be throwing Cruz and Julia together this episode. I actually felt like they had more chemistry when they were both taking on DA Tony Patterson.
Mm. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, that would be a kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Julia, it'll give Julia something to do if she's not going to
Mhm.
have scenes with Jack in the future. So anyway, they have a bit of a back and forth, and then they kind of make up pretty quickly. And Cruz says, at least they don't stay crazy at each other for long when they're arguing. So they feel they've improved in their relationship. And, she talks about how not wanting to do this. And he says, well, we could just pick up anchor and leave Santa Barbara at any time. We could just cruise right out. So, of course, they will not. I don't know if a houseboat is it designed for deep sea travel? Like, could you drive up the coast in a houseboat, or is it normally accompanied by like a towing vessel or something that would keep it safe? I don't know.
Yeah, you usually think of people if they're actually traveling somewhere that they're living on a sailboat or a yacht or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So that was it, and that was our first big corporate meeting. And I can imagine the entire series of Succession being inspired by watching this one episode of Santa Barbara. So not just the familial relationships that we've seen, but even the nature of the initial conceit of Succession, with the dad being incapacitated and the kids fighting for control. So we've said at the beginning, it seemed like a lot of stuff had been copied from Dynasty to get Santa Barbara. So it's nice to see that Succession is probably stolen completely from Santa Barbara.
Well, I think the soaps, some of them anyway, did have a lot more of that corporate business component in them. Even the really old episodes of Another World that you showed me, a lot of it at that point in the early 80s is a workplace drama as much as it is family and relationship drama. And you think
Yeah, a
about
lot of
shows like Dallas, that was all about the oil industry, which I guess Dynasty sort of is as well.
a lot of scenes on Another World take place at the complex. We've got Aunt Liz working there, and Pat and Cecile and Jamie and Mac, of course. We've got like a good chunk of the cast working at Corey Enterprises, soon to become Corey Publishing. Well, that is it for this episode. Songs that were popular in September 1985: Whitney Houston's Saving All My Love for You, Dire Straits' Money for Nothing, and Stevie Wonder's Part-Time Lover.
I'm sure we watched videos of all of those because, of course, MTV and Much Music.
Was Friday Night Videos on yet in 85?
Oh, I don't know, actually. And I don't know if Much Music was a thing either. But I think they probably had Good Rockin' Tonight.
Who was that? Ralph Bemmergy? Is that who was the host? Or am I thinking of something else?
Terry David Mulligan.
Oh, Terry David Mulligan. Right.
Talking about the Canadian one. And I think Friday Night Videos was actually before then. So
I saw Terry David Mulligan once at SFU doing a remote for something, for Much Music,
in
probably.
Kelowna now. Maybe you'll see him again.
He's in Kelowna now? Is that what you said? Oh, well, we're even though I'm in Kelowna, I'm still quarantined in a house. So unless he happens to drive up this road, I'm unlikely to run into him. Or if I see him on the gas station on the way out.
Yeah.
So definitely I've dropped Calculus 3. So down to 3 courses.
Good for you.
And that's about it for September of 1985. We will continue for the September 18th episode tomorrow. Episode 293. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We have finished episode 293 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired Wednesday, September 18th, 1985. And as a Wednesday show, I probably would not have been able to see it because I had lots of classes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. My big 3 classes. Mason and Mary's date didn't go well at all. Apparently, she got a headache early on and left.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mason doesn't think she really had a headache. She thinks that she's just hiding from the unknown. And after their conversation, Mary tells him she's going to quit working at the Capwells. But later, she has a similar conversation with Kelly, and Kelly decides to talk her into staying. She says, "Don't be put off by Mason," but Mary says, "Oh, I like Mason." So I think later on, Kelly asks Mason if Mary's her type, and then he responds with, "Is Nick your type?"
And I have to admit, I noticed that Mary was much more made up than usual.
Mm-hmm.
After her date with Mason, it looks like she's decided to put on the glam a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So then Mary asks Mason why Cece is angry with him and why is he angry with Gina. And Mason kind of starts to tell her, but like he can't really find a good way to do it. And then she changes her mind and says, "You know what? It's not any of my business." But Mason sends her flowers later in the day and asks her for a second date and says that he'll tell her. So I guess that date will be today instead, or tomorrow instead. Although there may be some Capwell business Mason needs to see to tomorrow. Eden and Cruz are on the Capwell yacht. And Eden is on the phone with Jack. So once again, Jack is still in the picture. Cruz tells her, "Do not tell Jack where we're going," which is going to work against her, I think, later on.
Yeah, I think so.
Eden wonders why he brought 5 pounds of butter on the trip. She says, "Sometimes you can get a bit kinky, or sometimes you can get kind of kinky."
Yeah, this gets a little bit saucy for daytime TV.
Cruz has a lobster trap in some of the early scenes and reveals to Eden that she will have a lobster dinner. He says, I'll have a couple of nice lobsters and I'll get an extra one for you." Eden tells them that a lobster trap is not like a vending machine. She does not expect that he will catch any lobsters. But he says that he used to work on his uncle's fishing boat. So later we see Eden has fallen asleep and a lobster approaches. Cruz is taunting her with a wet, yucky lobster, and she is quite grossed out by it. And I was thinking, doesn't she run a restaurant? Why would she
Yeah, that's what I
be
was thinking too.
shocked at the look of a lobster? But she may just have been playing, because she apologizes and says he really is a good fisherman. At the local fish market, she says, "I run a restaurant. Don't you think I can tell the difference between a Maine lobster and a Pacific lobster?" So he reveals that he has secretly bought some lobsters and just pretended to go fish for them. So they eat lobster and get butter all over the place. Then that leads to the obvious. Now, of course, the first thing I thought when I saw the Capwell yacht is there some explosive on board somewhere
I know.
that we've forgotten about? So maybe not. Maybe that explosive was all transferred into the tunnel.
You know, I always think, like, when I watch one of these soap operas, or sometimes it's not even a soap opera, but when they say something like, "Oh, well, here's your dessert," and they'll clear the table to have sex or whatever, or they'll decide to skip dinner to stay in. And I always think I would actually find that a bit disappointing, because I like dessert. And I would like, if I'm all dressed up, I want to go out for a nice dinner.
Well, they ended up doing that thing where they sweep everything off the table to make room.
I'm just saying that I would be kind of annoyed by that.
Dessert. Janice.
Yep, just up by passion the way Eden does.
Janice is looking for a job. She mentions that she's previously worked as, I forget the other two, but the third one was lingerie model. And Nick tells her he doesn't need a model. And then Janice says the only job she really wants is to be Mrs. Dylan Hartley. Kelly phones to say she's on her way over. So Janice is taking her time to get dressed. Like every time we see her, she's only slightly more dressed than previously. And, you know, time is ticking away as Kelly's impending arrival approaches. Dylan phones Nick. And Nick tells him he'll have to call back because he's desperately trying to get Janice out of there. And the line goes dead while they're on with Nick. So maybe this is some further scam of Nick's, for all we know, to try and get some more money out of scam of Dylan's to try to get more money out of Nick, or maybe just to get his sympathy so he doesn't get too angry with him for stealing all that money.
Yeah, it does seem a bit shady.
But they don't really talk about that much for the rest of the episode because Kelly arrives and Nick hides Janice in the dark room again. But Kelly almost immediately finds Janice's nail file amongst the proofs that she's there to check out. And Nick says that is his lady's nail file. He uses it to sand off the edges of the mat boards that he uses. But Kelly did at one point tease him about possibly secretly seeing someone, and then she realizes that she doesn't really have anything to say about that and says, well, I guess it doesn't matter because you're single and I'm single. We could see anyone we wanted to. And Nick says, we could both see anyone we wanted to, or something like that. In that Nick way he has of almost making something sound creepy. So later, Nick decides that just to make sure Kelly doesn't end up running into Janice, he is going to pick her up at work and they'll go to a different location to work on their book. But he says to Janice, just in case Kelly somehow comes over, lock the door. So as soon as Nick leaves, Janice says, time for a shower, strips off her clothes as she heads to the bathroom and does not lock the door. So once again, a tease of Kelly running into Janice. Later, we see Nick at the Capwell mansion looking for Kelly. So obviously he showed up at her work and she wasn't there. And Mason says, oh, I think she went to your place, which Nick is horrified by because I think he suspects Janice might still be there.
Might not be the most reliable person either, locking doors.
Maybe Janice and Dylan are a good match. Kelly arrives at Nick's and finds a note, which at first she assumes is for her from Nick, but she realizes is from Janice to Nick about some blueberry muffins or something that she left for him. And then she sees Janice sleeping on the couch. She didn't leave after all. And Kelly quickly replaces the note and runs away. So we will see how jealous Kelly is of this mystery woman.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically she's already said, oh, you know, you're free to date other people. And has been clear with Nick that she only sees him as a friend. But she did seem quite upset by that. So we'll see.
Better get together soon before Dylan shows up in town. Mason tries to find Eden, and after several calls finds someone who knows that she is out on the yacht and will probably be gone for at least 24 hours. So Mason realizes this is his opportunity. He calls Mr. Short at the Walton Hotel chain group and tells him that he knows that the price Eden's been offering has been a bit lower than what he had wanted. And if he wants his price, he should call Jack Lee immediately and say, the deal is off if I don't get this price in the next 24 hours, and I will authorize it. So Mason will be seen to be the person who closes the Walton deal in that case.
Yeah. Very sneaky.
But it's interesting, though, because doesn't the board still need to vote? Because they never did vote to go ahead with it. So I don't know if Mason can authorize closing the deal without all the votes. I don't think he can just retroactively change his votes. They would have to really reconvene. But
I would think, though, if he's got the Walton's deal in his pocket and it just requires, the board's approval. Like, I mean, Walton, why wouldn't they want Mason to be the one heading the operation, because he's just um, authorized a higher price for them.
Hmm. I wonder if Mason will call an emergency board meeting, and with Eden gone, it'll just be Kelly, Ted, and of course they're all going to vote yes, I would think, because they want it to go through. So I
We'll
think
see.
yeah. Amy tells Brick she's leaving for New Stalen tomorrow. She can't deprive Johnny of all of the benefits that New Stalen can bring him.
Mhm.
So later on at the Lockridge house, we see Brick calling around trying to find out which flight Amy is on from the airline, and of course they tell him because that's what happened in the 80s. People just told everyone other people's information. There
And
was
you'll
no
notice that
privacy.
you didn't have to go 5 hours early for a flight either. You could just
No,
hop on the flight half an hour
it's
before.
true. Although, were they leaving from Santa Barbara? Leave an extra day at the airport for that. So Brick asks if there's an extra seat on that flight, and the phone is hung up by Minx Lockridge, who says you can't leave. So this was a nice episode for Minx. She had this nice
It was
scene
nice
with
to
Brick,
see her back. Yeah.
and then Brick goes to Amy, who is packing, and he says, "You're going to need a second suitcase. I'm coming with you."
Mhm.
So Amy is happy, and then later in the episode, suddenly Amy turns around and Minx Lockridge is standing in the doorway of her nursery that used to be the dining room, I believe. And Amy's happy, though I would be quite shocked if someone had sneaked into my house like that.
She and Minx had a fairly friendly relationship, though, I seem to remember before.
Mm-hmm. So Minx immediately offers Amy a check for $100,000 if she'll stay in Santa Barbara. She says, "I just want to show you that there's as much opportunity for Johnny here in Santa Barbara as there's in New Stalen. There's more money where that came from. And, Brick can't really leave because he's got some opportunity of his own that he doesn't even know about yet." So she really doesn't want Brick to leave, and she's willing to pay for it. She seems to have her own money that Brick doesn't need to sign off on. I guess it's not real estate money.
Yeah, I feel like Brick really only needs to sign off on the money
Real estate transactions.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Amy does, because on the one hand, she did really seem to want to go back to New Stalen, and I think although it's framed as wanting opportunities for Johnny, I think there may be possibly opportunities for her in some respects, or I think there's maybe a little bit more that she finds appealing in it potentially. But apart from that, it'll be interesting to see if that's enough to make her stay.
Well, I think maybe a portion of her reticence was that she didn't know how serious Brick was. So the fact that he's, bought the ticket to New Stalen may be satisfied half of her issues. Are you frozen? Third attempt. Welcome back after an hour of trying to restart. So I think part of Amy's reticence was related to the fact that Brick didn't come to New Stalen and sweep her off her feet. So now that he has in fact bought a ticket to New Stalen, that might be sufficient to allay that half of her concern. And then the other half being the opportunities for Johnny is, of course, satisfied by Minx Lockridge's giant checks. So I think Amy will decide to stay in Santa Barbara.
I actually think she will too, if only for reasons of storyline. I think she has to stay so we actually find out what the mystery is around Brick's background, who he really is.
Yeah.
If she defies Minx and takes off and Brick goes with her, then
There's no
You won't
mystery.
know what happens. Yeah.
It's like if Columbo
mystery will be
decided to move
forever.
to Fiji in the middle of a Columbo.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, I guess Nick was working on photography stuff in this episode, but he's got a lot of stuff to do now. So maybe he'll between Janice and Dylan and Kelly and his PI work, he'll be running around town. So maybe he'll dig a little more into the either. Well, he still hasn't investigated Minx yet. He's spent some time on investigating Brick so far. So maybe he'll work that angle in the next episode.
And to think I thought he'd be killed off several months ago by Faux Jack Lee's thugs. I had no idea he had all this storyline ahead of him.
He's an integral part. So
I'm sure we'll see him right to the end of the series.
Be him and Rosa in the final scene. And Janice. So that is it for the episode. And we had some credits, and the credits were identical. The main credits, the contract, I think it's called, contract players were identical. Steve is still in there.
Yeah.
Theta's still in there. So obviously it's that 3 months contract cycle, not expired yet. I should be end of September, if July 1st is the beginning. So they'll probably be in there. And anyone else who's left will probably continue on until the end of September, and then we'll get some new credits. We have an extra person in the additional credits of Janice, played by Kathy Shower. And gone from the credits are Brandon Call and Felicia Ayres-Allen, who were in the, just that little day player or whatever it's called. No, it must be an intermediate thing between contract and day player. On call, on command, something like that. So I'm sure Brandon will appear from time to time as he appears, or maybe once the new contract cycle starts in October, they will add him to the permanent cast. So no clues yet as to the shakeups in the credits, but we will see what we see next time we get a credits.
Sounds good.
That's it for episode 293. So we'll be back after we've watched the Thursday episode 294 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've finished episode 294 of Santa Barbara, originally aired September 19th, 1985. Amy tells Brick about the check that Minx gave her yesterday, and she wants to stay in Santa Barbara. But
as we predicted.
But now it's a reversal. Brick doesn't want to take the money from Minx, and then at some point he comes upon this scheme that the best option for them would be to just leave town completely, go to New Mexico, Taos or Santa Fe, and start, I think a ranch was one of the options he had, and a ski hill. And then Amy said, what about Johnny? And Brick said, well, we probably can't put him to work for a couple of years unless we start a circus, and then we could have him in the parade. So I guess Amy takes all that in, and I don't know if she necessarily says yes today, but I think they kind of seem to think she's not going back to New Staland. So.
And we do hear at one point, near the end, we see them snuggling in bed, and there was a song I recognized, and I can't remember what it was, but.
Well, it was I Will Always Love You.
There you go.
Written by Dolly Parton in 1973 and released on her single in 1974.
Very good.
And then the first time I ever heard it was in 1982 because she sung it to Burt Reynolds in The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. And of course, it reached its greatest success in 1992 with Whitney Houston's rendition from The Bodyguard. But the version that they played was one I never heard. I might have heard it originally, but the song, didn't really register, I guess. It was actually a Linda Ronstadt version that we heard from her 1975 album, Prisoner in Disguise. So funny you should mention that. I just knew all those facts off the top of my head.
I'm glad I remembered to mention it then. Yeah, so that's kind of the vibe between Brick and Amy by the end of this episode.
Although while Brick's sleeping, she does get up and ponder. So
Yeah, and if you listen to the lyrics, you know, it does almost, in the lyrics of the song, it almost makes it sound like it's like a goodbye song, but then she gets back into bed with him. So
I guess we will see. Sometimes they have these little, back and forth
yeah.
things towards the end after you think a decision's been made on the show. Ted and Christy wait for the DA's call at the Capwell house. Later in the episode, Mason tells them that the DA has dropped the charges. So I think it now makes sense why I had no memory of how this storyline ended, because a guy came in and told the main guy that another guy had called him and said the plot was over. So there was nothing memorable about the way it ended, really.
No, it just kind of fizzled out.
Yeah. So once again, that's not the first, and it won't be the last storyline that fizzles out, but at least it came to a conclusion, unlike some of the left hanging storylines that we've already had. So it's other than sending Ted and Christy to jail, there's probably weren't too many other alternatives. So, but
And
maybe
if
Tony Patterson will feel the Capwells open.
if they're both out and free, that does leave lots of room for a bit of a triangle, whether real or apparent, between Ted and Christy and maybe Lakin if she's rediscovered again.
If Ted and Christy spend weeks looking for Lakin and don't find her, and then just as they kiss, Lakin walks in the door and sees them.
Yeah.
Very much like something that might be happening on Days of Our Lives currently. So it's an expected turn of events that will happen. So we will see what actually happens. Mason tries to get Mary to agree to that date redo tonight, and she is reticent. Christy and Mary talk about Mason, and Christy doesn't think that Mary can really handle Mason. She says Mason will have her for breakfast and spit her out. Oh, some good relationship advice from Christy. Kelly brushes off Nick without telling him why she's upset. So yeah, she's very upset at having run into Janice the night before, and she keeps downplaying it, but it increases throughout the episode. Kelly tells Ted she's jealous of Janice, even though she and Nick are just friends. And then Kelly used that sentence basically as a springboard to decide, well, yeah, we are just friends, so I shouldn't be jealous. So I'm just gonna not let it bother me. So she decides to go to Nick's after all to help him work on the book, because she had kind of said, well, if I feel like coming over, I will. So she won't really tell him why she was upset. He doesn't know it was about Janice, of course, so he's not quite sure what he may have done to upset her. But then she sees a blueberry stain on his shirt, and she freaks out. And in a hilarious scene, she ends up running to the kitchen, getting the blueberry pie and smashing it in Nick's face. So come the next scene, they have, she started to slightly explain, and, when she says that she encountered Janice in his bed, that he says, well, that's, my brother's girlfriend. So then Kelly kisses Nick. So she was very happy to hear that. So, and then they kind of hug after some more discussion, and then I think they kiss again once. So of course, Nick
and just thinking about these three sorts of stories we've outlined, we actually see something in this episode that I always think is very soap opera-esque, but you usually see it more when there's like a cocktail party or something. And that is, we have sort of three couplings all in one room, each having their own storyline. So we have Mason and Mary in one part of
The summary
So-
was very easy to write because everything was
Yeah.
so segregated.
Exactly. So they're doing their thing. We have Nick and Kelly and having their relationship conversation, and then we have Ted and Christy, and we've got those three couplings all in the foyer around kind of the fountain, each moving their storylines forward.
Yeah, it's like a pivotal episode for each of them because each of them has basically come to a resolution of what's been bothering them for the last, period of time. So whether the Amy and Rick thing really is at a resolution, we will see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, as soon as Kelly kissed Nick, he says, "Aha, I love you. I loved you this whole time, and I'll just wait for you to come around."
Yeah.
So he can't dial it back ever.
No.
Just, play his cards close to his chest. Is that the phrase? So best. Eric reveals that Walton Hotels needs an answer within 24 hours. Mason says they should call a board meeting to discuss this turn of events. Eric is, of course, reticent because he can't find Eden. So Mason calls the meeting. Kelly and Ted once again refuse to make him acting president. But Eric says that bylaw 32B gives him 24 hours to assemble all the board members. So Mason, suspecting that they won't be able to find her or even where she is in that time, agrees. And they think they have one over on Mason, but he smirks as they leave the room. Mason tells Ted that his contacts at the DA's office that he still has can help him look for Lakin. Oh, and by the way, why don't you vote in favor of me as acting president of Capitol? This is actually a much longer conversation, which is quite good because, they talk about Eden and, Mason says, well, I was running the company with Dad while Eden was in Europe, try to make a case for the fact that he is more experienced than Eden. I don't think Ted actually says, but it was Dad's wishes, but, I just don't think he wants to hurt Eden, I think.
Yeah, I thought so. I always adore Mason and his scheming, but I think if you actually look at the argument he's putting forward, which is that he's more capable and experienced than Eden, and I think one of them brings up, well, she's run the Orient Express really well, so she's been involved. She does have business savvy, and Mason goes on about, as you say, how he was running the company when she was in Europe and so forth. But, we know Mason's been on a drunk basically since, the beginning of the series. So I actually think, as I say, although I absolutely adore Mason as a character and I always enjoy his scheming, I actually think just in terms of the actual argument itself, I think that one could be refuted. There would be a good argument against it as well.
So far, Mason has, generally gotten drunk when things have gotten bad for him. Even though he does drink a lot, we've never really seen it affect his work. Like he's never missed, not shown up for work or something. He's always just been fired or something. So, I assume he's still very functioning in the daytime.
Yeah, although his place of operation for quite a long time was the State Street Grill.
Yeah.
So, he didn't have it together to, set up a home office or anything like that.
At one point, someone says to Eric, "Have you told Jack Lee we can't find Eden?" And so Jack Lee is still very much in the loop.
Yeah, and I always feel with the scenes with Eric that they would just be so much more effective if it was actually Jack Stanfield Lee, because Eric just comes across as a bit of a dweeb. But I don't know if there were ones that perhaps were originally written for Jack Stanfield Lee, or if they're ones they've kind of cobbled together to just buy time while they figure out what to do with that character.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if they, generally if they've written a week or two in advance, they probably wouldn't want to rejig the scripts too much because, they're all kind of timed out to run 44 minutes or whatever. And probably the sets are already, set in stone by then and the wardrobe and stuff. So they probably don't have a lot of leeway to restructure radically or without spending money.
Mhm, mhm.
But yeah, Eric mentions that Jack had argued with Eden about leaving town, going incommunicado. So Eric eventually finds out that Eden is on the yacht, but they can't raise her, and he thinks, "Oh my God, their radio's gone dead." But Ted says, I think it's Ted or Mason says, I don't think so. Not with Cruz and Eden. They probably turned it off on purpose. So, and I think it was Mason says, "Oh, well, then maybe her career will be as dead as the radio," or something like that. Might have been Eric. So Eric says, "Well, we know." Ted says, "We know where she is now," and Eric says, "Somewhere in the Pacific Ocean." That's not very helpful, and we have less than 24 hours to find her. And Mason suddenly comes around the corner. 19 hours, and the Pacific Ocean is a very large place. So he hasn't really given away yet that he knew before that she was there, but he's definitely gloating over the fact that he now thinks there's no way Eden can get back.
So I'm assuming that either Eden will get back just in time to thwart Mason's ambitions, or just a minute or two too late. That's my assumption.
We'll see the yacht racing, or the yacht will blow up. Not completely.
We're still expecting
We're
that.
still wondering if that bomb is there. The engine's blue and they'll swim to shore. Yeah, so who knows how long 24 hours will take in Santa Barbara time.
Yeah, it might be the next.
Now that we're not waiting for the DA to call, there's no clock on anything else. So it could take 5 episodes to wonder where Cruz and Eden are. And that is all the events, basically.
Did you enjoy the credits this week?
Yes, there was. This was a VHS or maybe beta tape from NBC's airing of Santa Barbara. I think this is the first one we've had. We've always just had, a large run of Australian ones. And there was the NBC announcer saying, "Tonight on The Cosby Show." And he name checks The Cosby Show, Family Ties, Cheers, Night Court, and Hill Street Blues. So that's kind of fun. We've actually been rewatching Hill Street Blues because the calendar for 1982 and 2021 have the dates line up. So we've actually been watching the 1982, was it 82 or 81, 82 season of Knots Landing and Hill Street Blues on Thursday nights. How many years? 39 years after their original airings. So, and I think that went off the rails last week when I had to leave town. Suddenly we have one episode of, I think, Knots Landing or Hill Street Blues left to finish the season. So.
And they actually gave a little synopsis of each episode too. And the Family Ties one had Alex learning a lesson. And that's what I remember from Family Ties, was that Alex was always learning a lesson in each episode.
I know my friend Kevin couldn't watch Family Ties because, especially Skippy, but sometimes the other characters would get into these very cringy situations and he just couldn't take the stress of watching that happen to people. And as I watched, I watched that new show Chad, and there is a lot of overlap between the cringiness between Chad and Family Ties, I would say.
I have not been watching Chad.
Well, it was renewed for season 2, to many surprise. I just watched the pilot today, which the PVR hadn't picked up originally. It was a hilarious love scene to the theme of Punky Brewster. So.
I just have a really hard time, getting past a middle-aged woman playing a young boy. It's distracting.
Suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it'll be animated for season 2.
It'll be better.
And that is it for the summary of events. And you didn't really want to guess who's leaving this week, so I'll probably talk about it next week. We may not even be able to figure it out for a while, the way these things go.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I am disturbed that we haven't seen Warren for a while, but I can't imagine them writing out his character. I can imagine the actor maybe getting a bit tired of that and moving on to something else, but I don't think they would just drop the character. So that's one I noticed.
Yeah, we have not seen him.
Eric's still around. I don't know. Maybe we'll get a new Lakin or a new Santana, perhaps.
So all good guesses. And we will get a new character next week.
Oh, now one thought I had is that this could be a Dylan, maybe, or a now that Joel Carruthers is gone, either a new Jack Stanfield Lee if they decide to recast, or someone to kind of take on that positioning.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think with Steve gone, they have some funds in the budget for someone on the payroll. So Janice got added shortly after Steve vanished. And then the person who left last week has freed up some budget for a new person to come. And the person who left this week probably is freeing up the budget for Dylan. So yeah, I expect to see at least one more character in the near future, considering we have that extra budget. So yeah, I think the next 3 or 4 weeks is slight cast changes in each one. So
Cool.
yep. And that's it for this episode, Thursday episode. Anything else you wanted to add or talk about? Hope we see Minx again soon.
Yeah, I always enjoyed Minx.
Unless she's the one who left the show this week.
Well, she's the one who left the show. In which case, we'll be welcoming new Minx.
Janice Page. All right, we will see you after we watch episode 295, a Friday episode of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I cannot believe Lana let that short person into my house.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 295 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, September 20th, 1985. So I think we're well past the sweeps ending now. And just slowly starting new storylines, I guess. Lionel and Brandon are having fun at the Lockridge house. Brandon answers the phone at one point when Augusta calls from LA, and she says, "I can't believe he let that short person into my house." So she bails on the rest of her nail appointment and races back to Santa Barbara. Mason finds out that Brandon is at the Lockridge house, and he runs over there to put a stop to things, tells Lionel that he's Brandon's legal, I don't think guardian is the right word, but representative, let's say, until he turns 18, and Lionel isn't allowed to see Brandon. He believes that Lionel is after Brandon's share of the Capwell money. So Lionel laughs and says, "I've had many goals in my life, but emulating a Capwell isn't one of them." So Lionel tells Mason that Channing probably would have turned out much better as a Lockridge, and Mason says he could have turned out worse. I don't see how that could have happened.
No.
Lionel.
I mean, Warren and Lakin are certainly not worse. So.
Yeah, exactly. Lionel tells Brandon, as Mason takes him away, that he'll see him soon. So he's planning to completely ignore Mason's edict that he not see Brandon anymore. Cruz and Eden enjoy several hours on the yacht, making references to butter and suntan oil at various times. But Eric has a team of helicopters scouring the Pacific for them, and eventually they hear some choppers. And Cruz is crestfallen because he suspects that they're Capwell choppers. And as they get closer, they realize that, of course, Eden's first thought is something happened to Cece. So Cruz, I guess, thinks, well, we better find out. But then, of course, Eric boards and tells them, nope, it's all about Capwell Enterprises. And Eden needs to come for an emergency board meeting. So Cruz says, well, I'll just wait for you here, trying to force the issue of her returning as soon as possible. But Eden says, no, I don't know. I think you better come home with me. I think she's thinking this might be a long session or multiple sessions again,
Mhm.
which Cruz wasn't too happy about. Brick tells Amy that he's going to go back to law school as part of his plan to raise all the money he needs to give Johnny the same life he would have in New Staland. Amy tells Brick.
Sorry, I was going to say this is met with some skepticism by Amy, which was also my reaction because law school takes time. It is expensive in and of itself. And they're going to have to support themselves now, not only in raising Johnny together, but through Brick's law school. So.
If they go to Santa Fe, he can't practice in California, although somehow Julie is able to. So, and if he stays in Santa Barbara, well, Santa Barbara's got a lot of lawyers.
Yeah.
But Amy says that she's changed her mind about everything and is going back to New Staland. She says it could take 20 or 30 years for our dreams to come to fruition. So then Brick says, okay, well, then I'll come with you. Janice is bottomless once again. This time she is wearing Nick's shirt, his good white shirt, and she is borrowing his black suit. And that is because of the job interview she's going on. But then Kelly magically pops out of the kitchen. So that was a shocker. Right? We didn't realize Kelly was actually there that whole time. So I'm guessing Janice came out of the bathroom and Kelly had come over while she was in the bathroom. That's the only way she could have been in the kitchen without having run into Janice yet. So Janice says she is applying. Oh, Janice and Kelly get introduced, and Kelly tells her about the mishap with the pie. And then Janice says she's applying for a job as a chauffeur for one of the wealthy families in Santa Barbara. And Kelly says, oh, who is it? I might know them. And it's the Lockridges.
Yes.
An interesting conversion of storylines because it never occurred to me. Brick is leaving. They're going to need a chauffeur. Janice is looking for work. It actually is brilliant, I think.
Yes, and it's so delicious watching this scene because you just know how Augusta is going to react to someone like Janice. So it's very.
I'm sure she'll be allowed to weigh in on the hiring. Let's see as the episode progresses.
Yeah, but it's very delicious that she is also in Los Angeles at this point.
Yes, she is. She's hurrying back because she thinks Brandon is the big issue. So Janice goes to her job interview, and Nick records Kelly's memories of her and Eden's relationship for chapter 2 of the book that they're working on. And then she reminisces about Brandon, watching Brandon learn the Pledge of Allegiance last week, and says that she wants 2 or 3 kids of her own with the right guy. Of course, Nick, has some ideas about who that might be.
I also thought it was quite funny because she reminisces about borrowing Eden's ballet shoes, and she talks about how smelly they were. And then, of course, the very, very next camera shot is a picture of Eden's feet.
Cruz, I guess, doesn't mind as much as Kelly. So Eden arrives at the Capwell house in time for the vote. So Mason changes his tactics and offers to vote in favor of the merger if he's made co-chief acting officer. So I guess that's lower than acting president. It's basically on the same level as Eden. So I think he figures, okay, I'll go one rung lower on the ladder to start with. Then I'll see if I can bump Eden out somehow. So Eden says she's totally willing to outweight him as much as he was willing to outweight her. And she doesn't care if they blow the Walton deal because there's another one coming along. And she refuses to let him into Capwell and walks out of the meeting.
Actually, he walks out first, doesn't he? I found that interesting.
I wonder if they had been talking about, their strategy already on the way back, and he wasn't shocked by that, I guess. So who
Yeah,
walked out
because
first, Mason or Eric?
no, Mason walked out
Okay.
first. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. What's he doing? And he had a sort of little smirk on his face. So you definitely got the sense that this was just round one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Mason's probably got the next thing in the queue. She's willing to blow the Walton deal, but I think he's going to get Walton to put a different kind of pressure on.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I guess there's no other shareholders that could complain about, mismanagement or purposely blowing the deal, unless Sophia and or Gina have anything to say about it. So I don't know.
He's still working on Ted though, right? Because Ted, Eric said he had Ted's vote, which
Ted wasn't at the meeting. Yeah.
No, he wasn't at the meeting, but Mason's been laying it on pretty thick that he is sort of there for Ted. He was the lawyer who got him off on the rape charge. He's the one who really has Ted's back. So I think that could have, I think that's another iron that Mason has in the fire that he's kind of working on that could pay off.
The angle that this is what Dad wanted, and now Eden's blowing this whole deal for no good reason.
Yeah.
And then we have a sudden twist. Eden is told by Eric that she needs to fly to Hawaii to finalize the deal. Now, I didn't quite hear if it was this deal or some other deal. And that Jack will meet her there. So I guess this is justified by Jack globetrotting around the world, and he's, the only way he can dovetail his busy schedule with her is if she flies out there to meet him. So normally, your lawyer will make arrangements to meet you wherever you are if you're a massively rich executive. But in this case, the lawyer dictates where the client meets him.
Yeah, I thought that it was to smooth relations with the Walton company or firm.
Yeah, I think it was Walton related. Yeah.
Yes. So I guess they're based in Hawaii. I don't know. But it made me think that could be kind of interesting if she finds out that Mason kind of, was the instigator behind this sudden, change in attitude on their part. And, that's her being absent again, possibly from whatever else Mason might cook up while she's in Hawaii.
Yeah, that's true.
And she's taking Eric with her. It sounds like she's taking Eric with her, maybe not. And she's definitely going to meet Jack. So she and Jack will be off the premises, and possibly Eric as well.
Eric tells Cruz that Eden and Jack will make quite a team. So I think one of the other main things of having Eden and Jack alone together in Hawaii, or even with Eric, is that Jack will be making his moves on Eden yet again, and now they're in a romantic location. So I can see why Cruz is annoyed by that. Cruz just walks out of the room out of the house when Eric says that to him.
Well, Eric also, it's actually kind of an interesting moment because Eric actually really insults Cruz. He says, oh, maybe you can just go back and get the yacht. And Eden actually steps in. She's quite forceful with Eric. And she says, no, Cruz is not an employee. Yeah, he's not a servant. We'll get one of the Capwell employees to do that. And this was, I thought, one of the few scenes I've sort of seen where in some ways it was almost more effective for Eric to be saying that, because here's very much an underling of Jack Stanfield Lee and really just an employee with his firm, now sort of feeling empowered to order crews around. And so I think we get a lot of, a lot of sense of how Jack Stanfield really views crews, and you get a sense of these sort of arrogance and maybe other assumptions involved there too. So in a way, that I think that probably stung more than if Jack Stanfield Lee had said it.
I mean, I imagine in the original script it was going to be Jack
Yeah,
said it, but it works to make Cruz angry at the whole situation, I guess,
yeah,
and will
yeah.
easily transfer over to Jack when necessary, or Jack's replacement, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I just can't help but think that Jack's replacement is going to have to be romantically pursue Eden just as much as Jack already has these few times. So
Hmm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
imagine that is something that will be taken into account in the casting. I mean, now they're like, okay, this new person's going to have to take over the Jack pursuing Eden part of the story. So they probably are actually weighting the casting towards that. So we will see who shows up, that mystery person that Jack said, I've got just the person for you.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it has to be someone with, because they've kind of written all this for a character with certain abilities and instincts, but it also has to be, if it's not going to be Jack Stanfield Lee, it can't just be a clone of him. It has to be, a fully realized character in their own right, I would think, in order to have the weight to kind of hold the attention of a character like Eden.
And now that they don't have to worry about the Julia storyline also being realistic and Augusta, they can just weight all the the casting into who's believable as a potential love interest for Eden. So it actually might have been strengthened by losing Joel Crothers.
Yeah, well, I think he definitely had the talent to do it. I think, I think that would have been a really interesting thing. But now that they can, I don't think that character was introduced necessarily with that intention.
Yeah, it was
So
quite a long time ago. So
yeah, so now they have a chance to really cast someone with that storyline in mind.
yeah, it will be interesting to see how that person is introduced, how Eden reacts to them, and
Hmm.
obviously they're going to have to quickly accept him as Jack's replacement. So we'll see how they make the transition. Kelly returns from the board meeting and tells Nick that she couldn't stop thinking about him during the meeting, and that she stopped by Joe's grave for a couple hours, I think she said, and that her thoughts kept drifting back to Nick as well.
Mm.
And then they kiss several times during this subsequent conversation. So I think Nick is very happy at this turn of events.
Now, of course, as viewers, knowing Kelly's history, we can also see this as probably a bit of foreshadowing about perhaps the ultimate doomed nature of this romance, but maybe not. Maybe
Well, Kelly says, I'm scared I'm going to lose you. And Nick says, you are never going to lose me. So, we can take that as 100% factual.
sure.
So I don't know why you would think that could be any kind of a problem in the future.
Especially with a smuggler, drug runner, probably brother.
So Kelly and Nick kissed several times, I think. We've talked about that. So, yep, things should progress between them for a while before we see Dylan, hopefully. I guess the phone went dead, actually, the last time they talked to Dylan. They don't seem too concerned by that.
I guess there's not much they can do about it, really, if he's on the run. I don't know if it's really occurred to Nick that he's probably doing illegal activities.
Mm.
If he had, he would probably also be reluctant to talk to the police, but as it is, it just doesn't seem to have occurred to him.
I mean, he is a detective, so he could have tried tracing that call at least, I guess. Well, we'll see Dylan when we see him. Meanwhile, Janice seems to have started a life in Santa Barbara that interacts with other characters because, she's going to be linked to the Lockridges. Brick tells Lionel that he's going to New Staland, and Lionel is pretty happy that he's leaving. And Brick shows him the torn up check and says, "Give this to Minx." So Lionel's not necessarily sure what that is. I don't know if maybe in the next episode we'll see him piecing it together and seeing how much it was for and confronting Minx about it. But they kind of have like a begrudging goodbye because Brick, says, "Oh, I would have liked to have gotten to know you better, but I don't like you." So, and then Janice arrives and she has her little chauffeur cap on. And as soon as Lionel answers the door, she whooshes off her hat and shakes her blonde hair out. And Lionel seems very intrigued by it's starting to rain. Lionel seems very intrigued by this new arrival at his door.
Yeah, he didn't seem that unhappy to be greeting a lovely lady in a suit.
Mm-hmm. Invites her right on in, and she mentions her former jobs include mechanic, modeling, scuba diving, working on fishing boats, bartender at Coco Locos. I thought Lionel would be excited about the scuba diving, but he was the most excited about the margaritas that she could make. So Lionel has Janice fix him and Brick lime margaritas as kind of a job interview or test. So Brick's like, I'm supposed to get to the airport, but I'll have one.
And it actually kind of looks like he ends up maybe having more than one.
Yeah, because not realizing that Lionel's watch has stopped, Brick ends up being in like an hour and a half late to meet Amy at the airport, and we see her like with Johnny, like, "Oh, where is he? Where is he? Why isn't he here yet?" So, the rain is.
Meanwhile, Lionel's there with a mask. Sorry.
I gotta get out of the rain. It's gonna wreck my new laptop. We're on the road with Misha Dianne on Santa Barbara. We are on the road again. Yeah, say hi to the people who love Santa Barbara, Dad. Wave to the people who love Santa Barbara. Wave to all our fans. We're out of the rain, everyone. Okay. So, not realizing that Lionel's watch has stopped, Brick is very late for the airport. Amy and baby Johnny have been looking at their watch, wondering where he was.
And I actually love this scene, because Lionel is being so typical Lionel. He's got a mask. He's recounting some long tale about his encounter with some sort of tribal chieftain. And of course, his watch has stopped.
He keeps telling Brick it's 7:00.
Yeah. And he's just about to do a demonstration of some sort of traditional dance. And there's poor Brick, who's, I think a wee bit tipsy at this point from all the margaritas, and desperately trying to get to the airport to get on that plane and start his life with, and start his new life in New Staland.
I mean, when he finds out it's 8:30, he's like panicked. I gotta get to the airport. And so Lionel says to Janice, she's hired and her first job is to drive Brick to the airport. So she's pretty happy about that. Obviously, she hasn't been drinking as she's the chauffeur, so that's good. So she asks which car she's going to be driving, and he says, "Oh, the one in the driveway there. The Rolls?" So she seems a bit nervous to be driving a Rolls Royce, in fact.
Yeah, so this we can take as perhaps a very small premonition of what our cliffhanger is going to look like.
I think so. I think I had an idea once. Well, there was some intercutting with another character's antics, so it was telegraphed a little more directly. But She has trouble getting it into gear, and then she says, "Now, how do I get to the airport?" So
Rick is looking shocked and horrified. And of course, he still doesn't know what time it is, really.
and she floors it as she gets it into gear to pull out onto the street onto, I think it's Park Lane, we decided years ago. But who should be turning into the Lockridge driveway at 70 miles an hour at the same time? Augusta Lockridge, and the two vehicles collide. So Augusta was going pretty fast on the highway. I don't know if she could go quite that fast on Park Lane because we looked on the map and it's pretty windy. And but I think there may be possibly some injury. It felt like, they, with that speed issue, they may have been trying to telegraph that it was a bad accident.
Yeah.
My thought on that was Brick should be the one injured. It's the only way they're going to keep him from going to New Stalin, right?
Yeah. He's also the one in the passenger seat. So I don't know if they would have necessarily had airbags in 1985, but
In an old Rolls Royce, perhaps not.
no,
Retrofitted.
so perhaps not. But the other two do have the sort of steering wheel to keep them from going through the windshield. Britt just kind of threw himself into the passenger seat. I don't even know if he's buckled up, so he would definitely, I think, be the best candidate to be injured.
So Amy would end up going to New Stalin without him. He might be laid up in the hospital for a while. So that would give the chance of the, why is Minx so interested in Brick storyline to continue? Because he'll actually be in town. And he may end up recovering in the Lockridge, in Lincoln's room.
That's what I'm thinking. And if he can't, reclaim his old job, because of course they've just hired Janice, she can stay on as a chauffeur. So that could lead to all kinds of, especially if Augusta is kind of laid up too and doesn't really have the wherewithal or whatever to fire Janice right away. That could lead to all sorts of fun little tensions with her being there and Augusta being jealous. I thought I noticed a tiny bit of heat between her and Brick, Janice.
Oh, interesting.
So that could be.
So if Amy heads off to New Stalin. Yeah, I wonder if we'll see Lionel running up the stairs, bringing meals to Augusta and Brick because they're both unable to get out of bed.
Yeah, and maybe more Minx as well. So, we'll have to see. I think with Lakin having gone missing as well, there's definitely lots of drama to be had in the Lockridge.
Yeah, they've got a couple of nice storylines going. We didn't see Minx today, even though they were hiring a new chauffeur, but it's interesting because Minx would have presumed Brick wasn't leaving. So I don't think Minx would have initiated the hiring of the new chauffeur, but probably Augusta or Lionel did it just based on Brick's insistence that he was leaving. So
yeah, and Brick's not given a huge amount of notice, really. So one of the last things he does before he gets his margarita is he gives Lionel a note to give to Minx.
That's right. I forgot totally about that.
Maybe a source of some conversation between the two of them as well.
So I expect we'll see Minx early in this next episode. Maybe we'll see Lionel piecing together that check when he hears a crash, and so he'll have that info in his head when he talks to Minx, and maybe Minx will come running out when she hears the crash. Presumably she's not out playing bridge since the Rolls is home, but yeah, I guess Brick could have dropped her off earlier. But maybe she doesn't know that there's been a new chauffeur hired. So it'd be interesting to see how Janice and Minx get along.
Yeah, and we know that Nick wants Janice out of his home. Maybe Janice needs somewhere to stay.
Maybe she can ask if there's a chance of this being a live-in chauffeur situation, and Minx might be more than happy to have someone so close at hand and on call.
Because remember, Brick lived, I don't know, where did he live? Above the garage or something?
At Amy's, yeah.
Yeah, but before he moved in with Amy.
Yeah. I
So
don't remember where they
that
had him.
might be available.
Yeah. So it'll be Janice is meeting the various members of the city, of the cast. So we'll see where she ends up on the what is it? What's the word I'm thinking of? Palette of Santa Barbara. And that is all that happened, but a few fun and interesting things that we couldn't have predicted. So I guess we could have predicted the chauffeur thing if we'd really thought it through. But it came as a nice surprise to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is it for week 60 of Santa Barbara. And anything else you want to add about the week? We had 2 people leave in the last 2 weeks, and eventually it'll be obvious who they are. But for now, it's not necessarily clear.
Mm-hmm.
And next week, we might be seeing a new cast member joining.
I'm expecting at least 1 new cast member, if not 2.
All right, we will see what day they appear and who they are when we return for week 61 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. See you next week.
Bye.
Oh boy.
Kelly, you are never going to lose me.
Minx is going to have us dancing like puppets.